such a time as this.
And welcome back to For Such a Time as This, the place where there is no such thing as a silent witness. We want to encourage people to go to our website, for such a time as this, .today, .today, not .com, not .net, not .org, .today, for such a time as this, .today, because we have subscribers that are not getting the alerts from YouTube. Big Brother may be playing games. This is a way to sidestep him. Go to our webpage, for such a time as this .today. If you would be so kind to put a bookmark, and when you look on it for videos, watch the video on the website. It actually helps bump the website up in the Google searches. Okay, let's get started. White Fragility Part 3. White Fragility Part 3. And for those of you who have not seen it, we're going to put Abby's moniker up there. She is a Barbie, she is a Karen, representing the good white people. Welcome, Prof Abby.
Good afternoon, Pastor James. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll get started again. Looking over the book, or interacting with the book, White Fragility. Abby, take it away.
Yeah, so, we've been dealing with the past couple episodes of this. We've been talking a lot about what I would call the trees. And there are so many trees to shoot at. White fragility. We could spend all year on this, but I think when we do that, we're going to miss the forest, and I think the forest is really important here. So this week's going to be a little bit different. I've done some background research just for myself, and in fact, I've been looking into this for months, but I came across a really helpful article over at Heritage Foundation. It is linked down below. It's called The New Intolerance and Its Grip on America, and it really does give you the background of what we see happening in the United States today. And the truth is that, as we know, critical race theory is the foundation of the book White Fragility. And the author, Robin DiAngelo, is a critical race theorist. But where does critical race theory come from? And that's really what we're going to be talking about today. And I don't know how many people would be surprised to hear this, but critical race theory is really a manifestation of Marxism. And it creeps out here and there. We're going to be talking about that in a minute. But the civil rights activism in America today, as far as I can tell, all seems to be a manifestation of Marxism. So, from what most people understand, that
and I want to make sure people understand. You say the civil rights movement of today, not the Martin Luther King civil rights.
No, very, very different. In fact, I think that BLM supporters, they've all at this point kind of repudiated and renounced Dr. King, because his values are antithetical to what they're trying to do today, and we'll talk about that too. So anyway, the original form of Marxism, of course, by Karl Marx, was based on economics, and it divided people into two groups. You were either a victim or you were an oppressor. But of course, this was along economic lines. But what the Marxists of today have done is apply the idea of victim versus oppressor to the arena of civil rights. And we have a slide on this just so you have something to look at. And basically, there seem to be three major thrusts. And one is among racial minorities. It's white versus people of color. Of course, and then the sexual minorities, the LGBTQ group, it's depending on how you want to parse this out, it's heterosexual versus LGBTQ, but there is some leeway there on who the oppressors are. It's going to end up being Christians. But
You're smarter than I. I simply label it God, and then the opposite is Sodom and Gomorrah.
Well, yeah, there's that too. And then the feminism, which has been with us for a long time. And, I never realized the Marxist foundation of feminism, and it's men versus women. So in all cases, It's oppressor versus victim. And that's why they call this cultural Marxism, by the way, because you're applying the oppressor versus victim ideology to the culture. And so we have a video we're going to show you where this actually does creep out here and there. Once you know what you're looking at, then you recognize it a lot more easily. So when BLM founders Patrisse Cullors and Alicia Garza said that we are trained Marxists, this was not coincidental, and we'll run the video right now for you.
I think is that we actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists.
Okay, so we have it in their own words. It does creep out here and there, and like I said, once you recognize that what you're really looking at is Marxism, it's a lot easier to spot. So you can be a critical race theorist. Well, let me start the other direction. You can be a Marxist and not a critical race theorist, but you cannot be a critical race theorist and not be a Marxist. All critical race theorists are Marxists. And we see this again at the Black Lives Matter page. It's been since taken down, but we have a slide of it here of what was on it. It was on the What We Believe page. It did cause quite a stir at the time. So one of the things they said on What We Believe is that we disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure, and we engage comrades with the intent to learn about and connect with their context. So again, their Marxism is showing. Now you see also here on their, or you did before they took it down and reworked it, the spectrum of other Marxist-inspired minority grievance groups. Now you can put the next slide on there, Pastor James, if you. It says, we make space for transgender brothers and sisters to participate and lead. And then we do the work required to dismantle cisgender privilege and uplift black trans folk. We foster a queer affirming network. And I don't know if this one's on there or not, but when we gather, we do so with the intention of freeing ourselves from the tight grip of heteronormative thinking. So here we see the... Oh, yeah, I didn't... That's okay. So here we see that you've got the other activist groups. This isn't... You might be... people were scratching their heads saying, wait a minute, this is Black Lives Matter. What is this stuff doing on there, right? And the pieces of the puzzle were not fitting together until you understand that they're Marxists. So Black Lives Matter really isn't about the advancement of black people. It's about the advancement of Marxism. And how they do this is to fire up racial minorities, fire up women, fire up LGBT people as a means to an end. They are using the whole civil rights movement to advance Marxism.
But wait a minute. Wait a minute, Prof Abby. Are you trying to tell me that Black Lives Matter not about black folks? That's what it seems like you're saying, Prof Abby. Is that what I'm
saying? And when Patrisse Cullors admitted that they were trained Marxists, that's exactly what she said too. So let's just keep putting the pieces together. So a little background on this is during the 1930s, there was an Institute for Social Research in Frankfurt, Germany. Now, these people were Marxists, and they were trying to figure out how to export Marxism to the rest of the world. Now, mind you, this was during the time that Marxism in the USSR was producing purges, gulags, and famines. And these people at the same time are trying to export Marxism. So, my head wants to spin around 5 times when I'm trying to figure out how on earth people justify the things they do. But they did anyway. So as we talked about before, Marxism had originally been based on economics. It was the poor versus the so-called rich. Well, so they were trying to get workers, the quote-unquote poor, to revolt And if you remember, the slogan of the Communist Manifesto was "Workers of the World Unite." Their problem was the workers of the world were not uniting and revolting. So it was going nowhere. So these Marxists at the Frankfurt School put their heads together. They decided that the obstacle was that the workers shared the same values as their oppressors, and those values were being used as tools against them to protect and maintain systemic oppression. Is any of this sounding familiar? So they decided to launch an attack on Western norms and values, and this attack came in the form of critical theory. Critical theory is the grandfather of critical race theory. I hope I'm speaking plainly here and not losing anybody.
No, you're not.
Okay. So critical theory consists of relentless criticism of Western norms and values. It has nothing to say about non-Western cultures. The ultimate goal is to tear down Western culture and replace it with Marxism. Okay, so some examples of Western values. You can put up slide number 4 now, Pastor James. Some of the things they need to tear down in order to replace our system with Marxism. First of all, and let me say, I kept coming across, when I'm reading White Fragility, individual rights, meritocracy. They didn't like these things. And I kept thinking to myself, what's wrong with individual rights? And why on earth would you think that meritocracy is a bad thing? And so okay, so I'm going to explain what the problem is here.
Wait, so you're saying that in the book of White Fragility, they attacked the concept of individual rights.
Yes.
That in that book, that was a theme?
Many places. Yes, many places. And in fact, I think next time, in the next episode, I will probably just have a whole bunch of quotes from the book that we can go through and to kind of flesh this out so people can see and explain exactly what they're saying here. Because once you understand this is Marxism, then it's a lot easier to understand. Okay, so as far as individual rights go, when you grant rights to groups, it cancels out individual rights. It just does it by default.
Correct.
An example of that would be a wedding florist. And of course, we know that there are Christian florists and bakers and photographers that have been sued in the last 10 years because they have discriminated against getting involved in same-sex weddings. And this is under civil rights legislation that they have been sued and taken to court. Okay, so what is being said, although it's never said that way, is that people in certain groups have the right to that individual's services. So gays as a group have the right to the services of every baker, every florist, every wedding photographer. So it cancels out the personal individual right of the baker, the cake maker, and the florist. Does that make sense? Okay. So, another example of this would be the Obergefell decision. So, you couldn't get to legalizing same-sex marriage on the basis of individual rights because everybody was exactly equal under the law before Obergefell. It was not legal for anyone to marry someone of the same sex. So it was the law applied to everyone equally. What they had to do was to compare gay couples with straight couples. And now you could say, well, the gay couple doesn't have the same rights as the straight couple. This is an example of group rights. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so what you're saying, and if I'm understanding it correct, Obergefell, that was codifying Marxist ideology. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think in essence, by elevating the rights of groups over individuals, and every time the groups get rights, they are elevated, whether we're talking about hate crimes legislation, even when we're talking about things like affirmative actions and set-asides, and it destroys the rights of individuals.
Now, I do. Let me push back, not push back, but let me clarify. So, how would you, again, tying it back to what you said earlier, how would you now, I guess, what was your view? How is that different than women's suffrage when you're saying you want women as a group to have the same rights as men? How, do you make a distinction?
No, I think that's still a case of individual rights. All people should be the same under the law, whether they're male or female. The law should treat all people the same.
But the law was not treating women the same with men, because at the time women couldn't vote, correct?
Right.
And so how would you say, and again, I'm just trying to think this through, how could you say that the women's suffrage, women as a group, that was okay, but gays as a group is not okay?
I see the women, I don't see it as elevating. The women are individuals too.
Sorry.
They aren't just women. They're individuals. So if that law were still in place, that would mean that you would have the right to vote, Pastor James, but I wouldn't have the right to vote. So we would not be treated the same under the law.
How is that different than gays, though? What matters?
With the gays, if you look at gay individuals had exactly the same rights as straight people. Nobody, neither one, could marry someone of the same sex.
Oh, got it.
You had to go to the couples. You had to make it a group and say that this group has the right to marry and this group does not. Okay? Let's see. So, in the 60s and 70s, of course, we know with this, after the civil rights movement, the real one, the laws were changed to make blacks and whites equal under the law. At that point, the civil rights movement should have been over. But because the blacks had won the right to equal treatment under the law as individuals, so they shifted the focus to group equity, because that's the only way you could now say that people weren't equal. You couldn't say they weren't being treated equally as individuals. You had to look at the group outcome. And we hear this all the time, and we'll get into this more in our next episode. Okay, so that's individual rights. Here's meritocracy. So meritocracy is advancement based on achievement, ability, or hard work. So when we do that, which makes total sense, you want people who are qualified in their jobs and qualified to positions of leadership, right? But there will always be disparities among groups in that way. People are being treated the same as individuals. As an individual, you have to qualify yourself for a job or position. But, again, you don't have equity. Group outcomes are different. The Marxists can't tolerate disparities between groups. So they want to get rid of meritocracy. And the critical race theorists have dismissed meritocracy as a value that protects and maintains systemic racism. Mm-hmm. As such, they also call it whiteness. So meritocracy is a white person's value, Pastor James. I hope you know that. Mm-hmm. That's not one of your values. It's just one of my values. Mm-hmm. Okay, so they claim that meritocracy is used to keep white people in power, which is so insulting. What are we saying? That black people can't be qualified for certain jobs and leadership positions?
That's exactly what you're saying. I think it was Thomas Sowell who said that you have two brothers that grew up in the same household, same mother, same father. From a worldly standpoint, one is very successful and the other one's a bum. You can't even come up with equity with two brothers in the same household with the same parents. Equity doesn't even work with that. So how on earth can you have equity with people who grew up in different households in different parts of the country? So I thought that was the strongest argument I've heard on meritocracy, and the whole debate of the thing. Two brothers, one goes on to be successful, one goes on to be a bum. You don't have equity in that sense. What are your chances? What are your chances with the rest of society? So,
But somehow you're supposed to have meritocracy amongst groups, as if there are no differences in culture, and it makes no sense.
It does make sense, because you know why? There's no such thing as equity in the NBA. There's no such thing as equity in the NFL, right? But they want to apply it in other parts, which shows you it's not about equity. It's about ripping this country and this culture apart.
That is exactly right. The third thing I just want to talk about is absolute morality, or biblical morality, however you want to look at it. Marxists are atheists by definition, and without God, there is no basis for morality, right? So a lot of the tactics they use are completely immoral. Lying, looting and rioting, didn't we see that? I mean, we see lying on a daily basis, but looting and rioting all last summer and into the fall. Election fraud, blacklisting people. But you can't really have people hung up on morality if they're going to be advancing Marxism. So, Marxist morality is essentially the ends justify the means. Whatever advances Marxism is considered to be moral.
But hold on, Abby. Hold on. You sure that's not your whiteness leaking out, talking about the Bible? I mean,
well, that's what they're trying to say. Now, you just reiterated one of their talking points. They're trying to say that individual rights, meritocracy, biblical morality, and also, guess what? Capitalism are white values. So our last word is capitalism. And here's the quote from, you can put the slide up now, from actually the author of White Fragility. Robin DiAngelo says that capitalism is so bound up with racism. Capitalism is dependent on inequality, on an underclass. If the model is profit over everything else, you're not going to look at your policies to see what is most racially equitable. Well, now, isn't that interesting? Robin DiAngelo is also an anti-capitalism. What a shocker. Of course, none of these things are obstacles to true civil rights, right? They are all obstacles to Marxism. So basically, in a nutshell, the Marxist strategy is to divide people into as many groups as possible, stoke grievance among them, and launch a revolution. And you can hit the last video here. I think we missed a slide, but that's okay.
No, I got a slide.
Oh, okay.
We got Rick Trump out of that office right over there. Pull him out that Nah, we ain't about waiting until the next election. We about to go get that motherfucker. I ain't about that Because you know what time it is? I want y'all to be after me. It's time for a revolution. It's time for a revolution. It's time for a revolution.
It's time for a revolution. It's time for a revolution. Please explain to me, Prof Abby, how you can see these things going on in our culture. Everyone saw that. This man sitting up yelling, it's time for a revolution. How do you process that? How do you see that going on as cities are burning, as businesses are being looted, and this man sits up here, and it's perfectly okay with large portions of the culture. Nothing said. I don't understand. Well, I do understand, but it's hard to just accept that America is this far gone to the point where that man should have been dragged down off of that post or whatever he's standing on and thrown in jail. But we allow it. It's okay. That's under free speech. Really?
Well, I don't think, the reason I did this today is because, again, I think we focus on the trees and we miss the forest. And most people do not realize that we're talking about, this is a Marxist revolution. Most people don't know that.
What?
You think?
But in order for you not to know, you got to close your eyes. That's not the only one. But Patrice, a large portion of the black community embraced BLM. A lot of the white portion of the white community accepted BLM. You have he was a candidate now who's now president, did not speak out against BLM, in which the leaders, you saw the video, that's been circulated a lot. A lot of people have talked about it, and we've talked about it here at For Such a Time as This. They're telling you they're Marxists. Yet I'm sorry, did you ever see them, anybody in the Democrat Party, denounce Black Lives Matters when they're pushing Marxism? Did you?
Of course not. Of course not. But I have again never. I don't think I've seen a Democrat yet admit that that is what this is either. They're still trying to keep it under wraps. I think it seeps out here and there. The Democrats did? If they did, I missed it. Oh, yeah, but he doesn't mean real revolution, Pastor James. He just means in the area of civil rights and uplifting black people, we need a revolution.
Well, Patrice Cullors says it. She didn't mince words.
But most people, I think, just think, well, she's a Marxist and she wants to uplift black people. They don't put the two things together, would be my guess. That no, she's using black people in order to advance Marxism. And that's why I wanted to do this today. Like I said, next week we're going to go through some quotes from White Fragility and explain what is actually being said in plain language. But I just thought we needed a flyover and some background to get the bigger picture here. So.
Anything else? Do you want to close it out, or is that it?
I just do recommend, look at the resources below. That Heritage Foundation article was terrific. There's also VODDIE BAUCHAM talking about cultural Marxism, which is what this is. And I think the last one was the Black Lives Matter leaders in their own words. It's a short video, but it's very well worth watching.
So we've gone a little over it normally, but this is a important segment. And so here's the thing: the video that we're putting out now will be banned before this year is out. I'm pretty sure. So go to For Such a Time as This .today. Please like the videos, share the videos, sign up for the email list. Let me put it up there again. For Such a Time as This .today. For Such a Time as This .today. Because again, if you sign up on YouTube, many people are telling us they're not getting the notifications when we have new things up. If you go to this, sign up for our email list, we'll send out an email every Saturday with the new content. The email is designed for you to share it with your friends, and hopefully they sign up for the email list. So no matter where we're forced to flee, when we are disciplined by Big Brother, we can always stay in contact. Again, thank you. God bless. Marxism is evil. Why is it evil? Because it is atheistic in its beliefs. And people, if you do not believe America is going through some sort of revolution, you're lost.
For such a time as this.